So the first reset of Ulduar is now coming to a close. There was a lot of hype around it, and we want to know, did it live up to the hype? For me personally, it did, and I'm going to talk you through exactly what I've managed to get done in week 1, both from a personal standpoint and as a guild, and just give you my personal opinions on whether I think Ulduar is as hard as we remember, or actually a challenge to the classic community as we are today. I think the last point I want to answer first, I do genuinely believe that Ulduar is difficult enough, and it's about where the difficulty should be in terms of a good, challenging progress raid. The really good thing about Ulduar is the fact that actually, if you don't want that challenge, or your guild just doesn't have time to commit to try and overcome some of these challenges, then you've got the options of normal. And some of the normal bosses are even mechanically challenging, like Mirage, a long 4-phase fight where small mistakes can lead to a wipe quite easily. A lot of personal responsibility are needed for things like Mirage. Obviously, the personal responsibility actually goes up if you start doing hard mode. But even when it comes to normal, melee having so much going on, having to move away from shock blast whilst not getting hit by mines, and then in phase 2, always making sure you're behind the boss while moving out of red circles, healers feeling under pressure because there's a lot of healing going out in phase 2, even on normal. It still can be, for the majority of guilds, a very satisfying kill, even without pressing that big red button at the back. That is just one fight. There are many other challenging fights for most guilds that are limited on time or limited on the amount of players that they can actually choose from. And by this, what I mean is when you look at any of the real top guilds that sort of cleared it night 1, there was a lot of warlocks in this group, and for good reasons. There's lots of fights where there's lots of execute. So the first challenge that most guilds had to overcome was Iron Council. I'll be completely honest with you, out of actually all of the hard mode bosses that we killed, which on 10 man we've done all hard modes, so absolutely every single one of them, including Flame Leviathan, 4 towers, XT hard mode, Vezak's hard mode, all the keepers, got the key to Algalon. We're basically now just sat waiting for tonight to go and do Algalon on 10 man in a couple of different groups. Actually, I think it's just one group, and Algalon, obviously 25. We've still got that to do. We've got the key. So we're going to just try and knock both of those out in one night. When I say knock both of them out, I'm probably not expecting a kill in 25. Hopefully in 10, but we'll see. But as I was saying, the first thing that you've got to overcome is Iron Council, because if you want to be able to summon Algalon, you've got to kill Iron Council to be able to get the key, to then kill the 4 keepers on hard mode, to then have access to the Celestial Planetarium where Algalon resides. You don't have to do it on the hardest of hard mode, which is killing Steelbreaker last. You can do it on medium mode to get the key, but you want to do it on the hardest mode because that's where the extra loot comes from. Now, Iron Council, for our guild particularly, we had more wipes on this than every single boss in Ulduar across 10 and 25 man combined. Yes, that's right. We wiped more on Iron Council 25 hard mode progression than we did adding everything up across the 10-man groups and the 25-man progression group. We had a bit of a tough time with it, but we did persevere. We didn't want to give up. We wanted to make sure that we got this boss down so we could then move on to some of the easier hard modes such as Thorim and Freya, etc. But we didn't really have that much time testing hard modes on the PTR. We had probably an hour or so on Iron Council during the PTR, so really all of our progression was quite fresh, even though many of us have done it before. But to get these hard modes down in week 1, they're normally either a healer check or a DPS check. Iron Council is one of those where it's a bit of both, because you need to put some pressure on your healers, but also the DPS check is very, very tight on Steelbreaker, which relies on a good transition. Now, I'm under no illusion that casual guilds who just raid a couple of hours a week would be able to get this down particularly quick, unless, obviously, your guild is extremely experienced when it comes to Wrath of the Lich King content, and you're all very skilled, but you just don't raid very often. But going back to what I said a second ago, where I said Thorim is an easier hard mode, yes, it is an easier hard mode, but it still requires good positioning and people to have their eyes open. Every hard mode to actually get down should feel like an accomplishment, and it actually really does. There wasn't a single hard mode that we killed, especially on 25-man, where it didn't feel rewarding. From killing Hodir in 1 minute 59 seconds when you've only got 2 minutes to do it, to killing Mimiron with practically half the raid dead. Same thing happened for Vezak's as well. I think we lost about 7 people at the end, and we were sort of like just praying that it died. There was a lot of close calls, but there's not much room for error in hard modes when you're going in tier 7 gear. I would say 10-man is a lot more approachable and is where I would really recommend starting. If you haven't done any Ulduar yet and your guild's just getting ready to go in, I think going in with a 10-man or a couple of 10-man groups to really understand the mechanics and the fights on a much smaller scale is definitely what I would recommend. I would actually say that Mimiron hard mode is harder on 10-man because it's less forgiving than it is on 25-man hard mode, but all of the other bosses are drastically easier. easier, including Iron Council, where the DPS check is nowhere near as tight on 10-man, all the way through to Yogg +1, where you can literally phase the brain and have the fight over and done with in a couple of minutes. So taking my own experience of launch week and then looking at other guilds or friends that I know on different servers that are progressing as well or already progressed all the way through, including Algalon, I feel like there's a steep learning curve mechanically on many of these bosses, but ultimately once you get the tactics down that work for your guild and your guild alone, you'll be absolutely fine. I myself have many raid guides on the channel for all of the Ulduar bosses, but don't watch them and try and replicate them exactly, because they're what work for us. And what works for us is actually quite different to some of the other guilds out there, so you need to sort of understand the mechanics and do what works for you. You might not have a blood DK, for example, so how you approach certain bosses and what tanks you use is going to affect everything from personal cooldowns for that tank all the way to raid cooldowns that you've got available as well. And if you're like us, you haven't got access to 7, full BIS tier 7 warlocks, so you might only be running with 2, which means all these execute phases where these guilds that are massive have got a pick of whatever they want can be considerably more difficult. But overall, we got to see loads of 239 items, loads of 252 items. People have been getting upgrades left, right, centre, and it's just genuinely been a really, really good experience. The only thing I'm slightly worried about is people getting really worried that they're not killing hard modes and loads of other guilds are. Your guild's taking slightly longer than others to clear the raid as a whole, etc, etc. Don't worry about any of that at all. Even Ulduar 10-man hard modes has got lots and lots of BIS items that you can probably get for your class or spec, so just focus on getting those upgrades across your raid, so it will naturally make 25-man hard modes easier. It doesn't matter how long it takes, Ulduar is going to be classed as current content for many, many months, because even during Trial of the Crusader, we are going to be going back to Ulduar, especially for things like Battlenet and these 252 pieces, which outshine even current content in Tier 9, which is Trial of the Crusader, due to the massive item level buff. I will keep you guys informed if we manage to get Algalon down, and if there's any tips I can share to help you, I will. But as I said before, quite honestly, we didn't touch Algalon as a guild on the PCR at all, so I'm expecting quite a few weeks before we get it down. But when we do, I'll let you know. I am going to be putting videos out on how we sort of manage these fights and how we approach them, and tips and tricks that work for us that might work for you. I've already got Flame Leviathan done and I've got Ignis done. I'm going to try and work on a few more this week, so if you want to just get some pointers or see where we use cooldowns, maybe things that you've not thought about, like cooldowns that you've not thought about at particular parts of the bosses, make sure you subscribe so you can see those. Like the video if you liked it. And there is a way, actually, if you want to see all of our boss kills, well, the hard mode bosses, don't worry about the normal bosses, check the link in the description to Mince's channel, who's a rogue in the guild. He's recorded and uploaded all of our hard mode bosses, so if you just want to see how we've done things, go and have a look. See you on the next one.